Welcome to another episode of Digging for Gold. I'm your host, Dan Goldberg, better known as, or not maybe not better known as, but also known as Bearded Brilliance on TikTok. So I'm really Dan Goldberg. That's what they know me as. But Bearded Brilliance on TikTok. And we have with us today Alan Sheinberg, better known as my buddy Alan Sheinberg. Okay. And Alan's trek through life, business life, has been very interesting to me and to a number of people I know. So I want to start off by asking Alan how he got into a business that very few of us ever think about entering. And yet, not only did he enter it, he became very successful at it, started a business in it, and then sold the business and so forth. So tell us about your journey.
So thanks, first of all, thank you for having me and be part of this. It's my pleasure to be here.
My pleasure to have you.
I went to high school with you. You and I went to Central High School, and then from there I went on to the Philadelphia College of Textiles and Science. I wasn't the greatest high school student.
Neither was I.
But I was able to get into college at Philadelphia Textile, and that sort of got me involved in the thread business. I got a background in textile management and marketing. And I had a few job offers out of college. One of them was with Owens Corning Fiberglass. Another was with another company that manufactured, it was Ray Bestis Manhattan. And the other one was with a thread company. So I decided it was more local, stay in the thread business, and I joined that company right out of college. The rest of it is kind of my journey through several different companies over the years. My college time was interrupted by some time in the Army. I was in the National Guard for 6 years.
I've been there.
So
I did that. Yeah.
That was it was good training for me. While I didn't enjoy it, I thought it was a good thing for me to do because it
I feel the same way.
helped build me up. And so I worked for the small family-owned thread company for.
What kind of thread, if you don't mind?
It was industrial sewing thread. It wasn't the kind of thread that you use for home sewing or for apparel. This was more for manufacturing automotive seats, filter bags for large, big smokestacks, shoes, things like that. It was mostly synthetics, mostly nylon and polyester. And we converted it. We manufactured it from raw yarn that we bought from DuPont or Monsanto, twisted it into a thread, coated it, dyed it, did all sorts of stuff. We had a large contract with Ford Motor Company at that time. We supplied a good amount of the thread for their seats. They're very particular about that. You would be amazed at what the specifications were for that. It was very time consuming to get it done correctly, and you had to submit all sorts of samples to make it right. So I stayed there for I guess a number of years. Must have been close to 10 years. I moved on because I had some family issues that made that happen, and I went to work for a not so much thread company, but a large rope and cordage company up in upstate New York. And was there for a couple of years. They were in.
What's rope and cordage?
So rope is the kind.
Sounds like my law firm. Rope and cordage. Can we help you?
So this was these guys made everything from fishing line that you used for all sorts of fishing, to huge rope that you used on these big liners and fishing boats. For the trawlers that went out to sea, and also. They made what they called lobster pot rope and crab rope that you put on the lobster pots that you threw into the, made lots of that stuff. And I stayed there for a couple of years. That company was coming out of Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Wow.
I stayed with them until we got out and decided to move back into the thread business. I went to work for a company in New York City for several years that manufactured a different kind of sewing thread. Mostly also industrial thread, but mostly for handbags and shoes and things like that. Totally.
Is that the same kind of thread that would go into mattresses, or that was the first company?
That was different.
Okay.
This is more cotton thread, more
Mm.
more threads that you would be more easy on the fabric and on the leather goods that you were sewing. We really didn't get into the mattress trade until much later on.
Okay.
So I stayed with them for a couple of years. Then I went to work for another family business in Philadelphia. It was a distributor of sewing threads and supplies. I came in as their general manager and worked my way up to vice president of the company and eventually president of that company. And we supplied thread to the apparel industry and industrial sewing companies. So we did a little of everything. They were more involved in the apparel industry and wanted someone to bring them into the other part of the business, which is what I did.
It's very interesting to me because I would think that most of our viewers and listeners don't really think about sewing thread and the different areas and the different strata of sewing thread and the different industries of sewing thread. But it was, no pun intended, what holds things together, right? And most of the stuff that we have is either threaded or glued,
Yeah.
right? Or screwed.
Listen, if somebody would have told me coming out of college that I was going to work for 45 years in the sewing thread industry, I would have said, what, are you kidding? I mean, that didn't make any sense to me. I didn't think it was that big a business. I really didn't understand it at that point. I only saw a small piece of it. But as I went through my career and worked for different companies, I saw how large it was. Even though it was a declining industry in the United States, it was moving more offshore because of the expense to produce it here in this country. It still was a viable product line.
Are there still businesses, domestic businesses, that produce and manufacture here in the United States?
Sewing thread.
Yeah, sewing thread.
Only a small amount of sewing thread is manufactured in the United States. Most of it comes from other countries. There are quite a few sewing companies in the U.S. still. Almost all the mattresses that you see in this country are manufactured in this country.
Right.
It's too expensive to bring them from offshore.
Yeah.
It's
too expense.
too big a shipping expense. So, Sealy, Simmons, Serta, those are the big ones. But there are other smaller companies that are taking over a bigger piece of that pie. In my last company, we had a huge amount of business with the sewing thread with the mattress industry.
It's interesting because I keep seeing these ads for a company called Satva.
Yeah,
you see that, right?
I've seen it.
And one of the images they have, one of the parts of the video, is a guy, a man
sewing the
mattress. Yeah.
So
I think of you when I see that.
I've been in hundreds of mattress manufacturing plants and seen that operation. That picture that they showed you on TV is like the cleanest plant I've ever seen. I mean, it's never quite that good, but it is a good depiction of how they make it. He was sewing the tape edge around the edge of the mattress.
Right.
And there's a special machine that does that.
Yeah, but I think of you when I see that.
I appreciate it.
That's Alan. It's Alan's stuff.
So, I worked for small family businesses. I worked for a company coming out of Chapter 11. I worked for a multinational, multi-billion-dollar thread company. I left them and went to work for, actually became a partner in a thread company. After that, I parted company with the multinational, not of my own choice, and was offered an opportunity to become a partner in another thread company, smaller one, to help build their business up, which I did. I became president and stayed with them for a number of years. We had some ups and downs in that company, building it. We had some partners that weren't exactly helpful, but we managed to get through that, and eventually we went from 4 partners to 2 and sold that business to another company that needed us to supply them with a bigger piece of the country. They were more Midwest than West Coast. We were more East Coast. So we sort of complemented each other. I sold that company in 2014, and I stayed with them for quite a few years. So, and it was a good thing for me.
Did you ever get into the little literal sewing business that we think of as, let me get a little spindle of thread so I can fix my shirt. Did you ever get into that?
Never,
Never.
never.
No.
That was more. There were a couple of thread companies that did that. Coates and Clark was one.
Mm-hmm.
They had a whole domestic products division. That was not our thing. We were industrial sewing thread.
Right.
So,
But you never crossed into the other.
no, it was very, very expensive to produce thread like that.
Mm-hmm.
They had all the bells and whistles and mechanics set up to do it. I'm not sure they were making any money doing it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting business.
It's not cost effective. It just
No.
isn't.
So most of that's offshore, isn't it?
Now it is.
Yeah.
Now it is.
You think it'll be coming back?
I don't know. Maybe we should ask our current administration whether it plans to bring any
Sewing.
sewing. I would be very surprised if we could bring costs down to the point where we could produce apparel and other items like that in this country. I don't see it happening.
That's the whole sort of enigma with this bringing companies back. It's a question of figuring out this formula of how do we bring a company back that's so cost effective over there to manufacture it here.
It doesn't make any sense to try to chase that low cost industry or that low cost labor portion of the business when thread was almost all made here in this country when I first got involved, and then became expensive, more and more expensive. So then it moved down south. It was produced in the southern states because labor was cheaper there. And then that became a little bit too expensive. So then it moved into the Caribbean. And the Caribbean was good for a while. It was in Haiti and the Dominican Republic and some of the other islands where they could produce apparel goods at a low cost. And then that became too expensive. So then it moved to South America. And South America did a good job for a number of years until that also priced itself out of the market and eventually went to the Far East. So, and that's where most of it still remains. It's in Vietnam. It's in the Middle East. It's in Jordan. It's in China for sure.
It's interesting because this T-shirt, that I buy as a specific brand, the original ones I saw were made in China, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next batch came from Cambodia. And it was like, or maybe it's reversed, Cambodia first, China next. And that's the way it seems to be going. Cambodia, China, Vietnam. Haven't seen anything from Laos, but Vietnam is, to some degree, the new China.
I've never been to Vietnam, but I've spoken to folks who have been over there and been in some of those factories where they have sometimes 2,000 people sewing in one building. Mm-hmm. Incredible operations and not bad quality, very good quality merchandise is coming out of those factories.
Yeah. The Vietnamese stuff, even the Jordanian stuff is good. But I do like to see things made in the USA. I like to see good old USA things because I know that someone here is getting a job behind that. However, the other thing is that when it is made in China or Cambodia or Vietnam, it's brought in by a company. So they have salespeople, distributors, they have inventory people. It still creates jobs. It doesn't create the manufacturing jobs. It creates the service part of it.
Yeah, well, for one of the companies I worked for, the one that was more apparel oriented with threads and supplies, they didn't only sell thread, they sold Velcro and zippers and all this other stuff that went into the manufacturing of garments. They sold to some of the larger, very high-end women's manufacturers who were in this country. They had contractors all around Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey that did the sewing for them. They would supply the material, companies would do the sewing, they'd bring the finished goods back, and depending upon quality, if everything was good, they would keep it going. And that was a big part of that other company's business for a long time until The larger companies, Liz Claiborne's and Jones New York type companies
Mm-hmm.
that made very high-end women's wear, decided that it wasn't cost effective to do it that way anymore. They started to establish manufacturing arms in different parts of the world. They went over and set up contractors with their own specifications to make the goods the way they wanted them done.
Right.
They put their own people in place, and that changed the market.
It's interesting because I remember there used to be Philadelphia used to be a big clothing manufacturing.
Menswear was very big here.
Huge. Pincus Brothers Maxwell.
Yeah, I was one of our big customers, one of my customers, actually.
Pincus Brothers.
Yeah.
And they were actually, in my consulting end, a client of mine. And I remember that we went to Hungary and met with Hungarian people and Russian people about bringing, they manufactured Bill Blass, about bringing Bill Blass into Eastern Europe and Russia. And I don't know what finally happened. We did introduce them into those areas, but then they're not a fifth and race, I don't think.
No, they're gone. Well, I was friendly with Dave Pincus, one of the Pincus brothers, and his brother who passed away before him. They were some of my best friends were in that company. They manufactured very high-end men's tailored clothing.
Yeah.
It's not easy to make those kinds of goods offshore. It's tailored clothing. It's very high specification type stuff, and they're very finicky about doing it the right way. I did see some of the manufacturing for those companies move into Canada.
Yes, I have a Canadian bunch. I have a Canadian suit.
So do I.
Yeah, and it's
Does it
high-end.
speak French?
It does. It says Monsieur. And I said, hey, that's about it. Which is interesting because I was in Quebec and had to speak French, and was in France and had to speak French. But yes, it went to Canada.
And also really good quality. Really
Very
good,
good
really
quality.
good quality.
Nordstrom quality.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know what the price point was. I don't know what made it attractive to go to Canada versus make it in the States. I don't know that.
I can't figure it out. I think that we, as a country, we are a country, have to figure all those things out, because it would be nice to see those things come back into the United States.
I think, we see some of it on a smaller scale coming back into the States. It'd be, they have niche markets in different places depending upon if they can command the price they need to make it happen.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's all about. They have to be able to generate a profit. And the cost of manufacturing is not cheap here.
No, it's not. So they have to figure out, and you know this better than me. Well, I also had a manufacturing plant, but we're talking about your specific area.
My stuff was low-end stuff.
Yeah.
Compared to some of the other things. I mean, people that manufacture textiles were working on pennies.
It's true. People don't recognize that if you're working on pennies and you can start working on quarters, even with shipping.
Well, the customers that some of these guys and some of these companies dealt with were Walmart, and Kmart, and they were beat down over and over again on pricing. And, and Sears was another one that took a big chunk of business. And companies would get into this pickle where they would allow them to control more than 50 or 60 or 70% of their business. They would be their biggest customer. And then one of those companies would say, your prices are too high. You're going to have to cut the price, or otherwise we're going to cut you out.
It's funny that one of those companies that you mentioned, and since we're talking about thread and we sort of morphed into textiles and so forth, I have a cousin who was running a clothing company in Massachusetts or Rhode Island. I think it was Massachusetts. And he was all excited. One day he gave me a call. He said, and they had the Disney license for kids.
Oh.
It's great. But he got all excited and he said, we just landed Sears
Good
And
luck.
I said to him, don't get too excited because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Okay.
Yeah.
And I said, they will own you without you even knowing it. Because what will happen is they'll keep increasing and increasing their orders. You're going to have to either expand or say, we're at our max. And then they're going to hit you with lowering your price. It was like textbook. And he would call me and he said, yeah, we're expanding, we're growing, they're giving us that. I said, don't forget your smaller clients because
Yeah.
this company will rope you in. And then, as you said, they'll tell you to lower the price
Or you're going to lose the
or you're
business.
going to lose the business.
Yeah.
And I said, they will own you. They'll have none of the liabilities, none of the overhead, none of the employees, but they'll own you. And that's exactly what happened. And they drove them out of business.
It wasn't strictly an apparel oriented type of a problem. We sold Ford Motor Company. They controlled, I don't know, 35% of our business. It wasn't a healthy situation.
Yeah.
And if they decided your prices they were very tough to negotiate higher prices with. So if they decided they weren't going to deal with you, your prices were too high. A company that controls that much of your business can really, really put you down. I don't know who's listening to this podcast, but it's one of the basic rules of business is don't let any customer or company control more than 10 or 15% of your business. It's just not healthy.
It's not.
It's tempting, but not healthy.
It's very tempting. The best advice that you can have for an entrepreneur, for a business owner, is that.
Yeah.
Because they get all excited. It's the greatest. We got this thing, that thing. But watch out, because now they have you by the throat.
No, it's true. It's true. The other, another big part of the business is dealing with the military.
Oh yeah.
The military is the biggest employer in the country, and we supplied sewing thread, military specification sewing thread, to the military for not necessarily uniforms because that was a different ball game. That was apparel type threads. We supplied thread for backpacks and ammo, duffel bags, ammo gear, parachutes. I mean, all kinds of stuff like that. Prices again were very tough. You had to bid, everything was bid out on a contract basis. You could get a contract that would last a couple of years. It would be a really big contract, but were you working on really very, very, very tight margins? And again, you didn't want that kind of a customer to control a lot of your business. You're working on low margin to begin with.
Right.
If they take a big piece of your business, you're really in trouble.
And then when the contract runs out and you've hired all these people, you got to lay them off.
And what are you going to do? Exactly right.
I still have my duffel bag. It still holds up.
I used to have my uniform, but
Me too.
for some reason it doesn't fit me anymore.
I still have my fatigue jacket.
Yeah,
That fits me. Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
But you and I were both in the military at the same time.
Correct. The same place.
Same place, yeah.
Yeah. So these are things for all of you listening that any entrepreneur should take to heart. Alan's an entrepreneur. He not only worked in business as an intrapreneur, but he owned a business as an entrepreneur. And all the things that he's speaking of are lessons learned over the years of how your business can thrive or get screwed.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true.
And if you're listening to this for business advice, heed it. Because I could tell you the same thing about stories where somebody's trying to screw you and nickel and dime you to death. And I've had people say to me, no, we can't do it. I said, you got to go. I'm not going to buy from you. You got to be able to say no.
So we didn't only manufacture, we distributed for some of the larger brands of non-sewing, sewing thread and non-sewing thread products. We were a Coates and Clark distributor. They were the biggest in the country. We supplied.
What was that? Zippers and Velcro?
They were thread. So Coates and Clark manufactured all sorts of
That's right.
apparel weight sewing thread.
Yeah.
We worked with a company called Belding Corticelli. that manufactured really high-end synthetic sewing thread for the men's tailored clothing trade.
Mm.
We worked for YKK Zippers.
Oh yeah.
They were the biggest zipper manufacturer in the world. That wasn't their biggest business. Their biggest business was they manufactured aluminum windows and door frames.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was a family business.
That's pretty cool. I
It was-
didn't know that.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. If you could have your windows zippered in,
Yeah.
you can unzip your windows. Wow.
I actually went to
innovative.
Japan to visit them, and it's quite an amazing company. But again, family business.
And they manufacture in Japan?
They manufactured in Japan, and they manufactured all over the world. They had big zipper plants here in this country also. We represented Velcro USA. So, that talk about a brand name that everybody knows.
Right.
You don't say what they changed the name to later on when Velcro became very patent concerned and brand concerned. Everybody called the product hook and loop fasteners.
Wow.
Hook and loop fastener is the same thing as Velcro, but not the same brand.
It's sort of like tissue and Kleenex.
Exactly right. Hershey bar.
Hershey bar. Yeah. Or will you Xerox that for me when you really mean, will you photocopy it? So Xerox had to go to court and stop people from doing that.
Yeah.
And I think Kleenex did it too.
Well, I know that Velcro did the same thing.
Yeah.
If you were buying Velcro, you were a Velcro distributor, and you also started to import hook and loop fasteners from overseas. They either told you to either drop it completely, or they were going to cut you out, or they sued you.
Well, didn't they have a patent? Did their patent run out?
Yeah, the patent lasted for 17 years. That's how long a patent lasts.
Right.
And when the patent ran out, everybody jumped on the bandwagon. Now, they made the best fastener material in the world at that point, but it wasn't long after that other companies started to copy them.
Wow.
And we bought some from Korea, we bought some from Taiwan, we bought some from China. Over time we were a Velcro distributor, but because the costs were so high and other people were bringing it in, we were forced to compete.
Wow. I'll tell you, the Velcro works because my beard, you know that, my beard is Velcroed on. I take it off right after the show. I take my beard off, I put it in the car, and then for the next podcast, I put it back on.
Yeah.
People wouldn't recognize me.
Listen, if you're a distributor like we were, and you can align yourself with a brand name manufacturer and bring that into your bag of tricks as a source of supply and a product line that you can sell, it can really enhance your business.
Yeah, it elevates your business.
We had a combination of those kinds of things, so it was good for us for a long time. We did it up until the end. We really did. So
it's a great model. It's like the optical business. That was my business. If you have brand name products, people say, "Oh, there's
sure
whatever or whatever or whatever." I mean, there are people in the optical business or patients, customers, that are like people who like certain wines.
Yeah.
They like certain more exotic, maybe from France or from Italy or wherever, and they look for those high fashion things. And then there are mid-range designers like Yves Saint Laurent. Well, I shouldn't say he's mid-range, but Anne Klein, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if you have that name, it draws people in. If you don't have any of those names, it's they don't know.
Your business, the eyeglass business, has become so expensive.
I know.
I mean, it's incredible how much it costs to buy a pair of glasses that are for somebody my age that needs a bifocal or a trifocal,
Progressives.
a progressive lens, and also buy new frames. It's almost $1,000.
I know. When I first started, it was $25 for everything. You remember that?
Mm.
And most of the lenses were glass, and then plastic came in, and we still kept it at that price. Tinting was still for free because it's really writ dye, and you just dip it in and take it out. and then they came with photochromatic lenses that
Mm.
change as this light changes. We kept at the same price. But
Scratch resistant stuff.
scratch resistance and things like that. But then it became more, well, the frames were designer frames. And there was different kind of progressives and different coatings and different this and different that and this thing here and that thing there and the bells and whistles and all that other stuff and the very specific designers that only made certain kinds of frames.
So let me ask you, who created that market? Did your company and others like you create a specialized higher end market that
It-
made those products available?
It's interesting because I think the first ones were like Anne Klein and God, what's his name? Perry Ellis. Okay, the designers that aren't considered high-end designers,
Right.
they are in their couture lines. Okay, but once designers came out, my company, was almost forced to bring in
The higher end lines.
the higher end lines. And what I had to do was to justify that was everything was $29 by that time because my accountant said, you got to raise your price. Okay. So everything was 29, included everything, tinning, plastic, glass, whatever, frame, lenses. And it changed the industry really. But then we were forced to, people came in, you have Anne Klein, you have Perry Ellis. So I said, okay, we'll do that, but they cost more because the designer gets a piece of it.
Sure, they get a kickback.
They get a kickback. Yeah, they license their name and their product, and they actually may design it. But I said, you know what? If I'm going to add a $44 line, I'm going to add a $19 line to balance it out. And they were ends of lots and things like that you can buy a frame for 50 cents or whatever it was. But we were basically forced into it.
Interesting. So your product line became more and more and more expensive.
Yeah.
Because of the products that you had to handle. In my particular business, we were always being forced to lower our prices to find another product or another source of supply that would accommodate the market and keep our market share.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a different ballgame for us.
It's a totally different ballgame. But initially what we did was we forced everybody to lower their prices. That was our whole thing. Everybody was charging $125
to be competitive with you.
To be competitive with us, yeah. And now you see it. There are certain companies that have lowered their prices to be competitive with us. However, now that company is owned by Luxottica, and it is not the same vision that I had. Their strategy is different. Their pricing strategy is completely different from what it was when I owned the company. So it is sort of the reverse. It's very interesting because all those products, some of the products are made overseas, but a lot of the products are still made here. You know, Bosch and Lohm and people like that, American Optical, if they're still around. And there are some frame companies here, but most of it's imported.
Yeah. We had some higher end products that were very specialized that were required by specification. If the mattress industry went to a flame retardant thread specification years ago. So instead of using regular nylon thread for quilting, the fancy quilting patterns you see on a mattress, or the tape edge or the other threads that were used, they went to a flame retardant thread, which tripled the price of the sewing thread.
So if things got too hot in bed, everything would stay. It wouldn't explode.
Those mattress companies that was a bitter pill for them to swallow. I got to tell you, but they passed it on. They paid the price, passed it right on.
I was looking at the cost of mattresses recently. It's huge, exorbitant. Some of them, the higher end ones.
Well, if you buy one of those mattresses and the adjustable mattress that has the heat and the cooling and the vibration, and I mean, I think you could spend 10 grand easily.
Yeah,
easily.
You may as well buy a house.
Yeah,
right. Sleep on the floor and just have coals.
Well, you could buy a blow up mattress, and
it's true. And I've had them. I've had those blow up mattresses. This has been great.
Yeah, There's
Yeah.
there's an awful lot we can talk about. I mean, you're bringing back memories for me that help me, talk about some of the stuff that I actually forgotten about.
Business is amazing. I mean, if you look at your life, and I look at mine, you and I are the same age, and all the things we've done that we then pass on to people that are
Yeah.
watching or listening to this podcast so that they can eliminate the problems quicker. And they can say, well, Alan and Dan, they told me what happened, and maybe we should listen to them and not get into that mud.
In my sewing thread career, I worked for probably 6 different companies. I went from a manufacturer of synthetic sewing thread to a rope and cordage manufacturer for a little bit, to a cotton thread manufacturer, to a distributor who didn't make anything but sold threads and notions, which included the zippers and the Velcro and all the other stuff along with the sewing thread, and then to another distributor that did other work that concentrated mostly on the mattress trade. But at each step along the way, I learned about their particular phase of the market and learned about their products, and it helped me, and the way they ran their business. It really helped me a lot.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about younger people that are watching this now or listening to it that may not even have thought about industrial thread
Yeah.
period, that go, well, wait, I want to design mattresses. I want to design chairs, okay? Because everything, even the chairs we're sitting in, have industrial thread.
Oh yeah,
They have to.
absolutely.
Or I want to design clothing. That's a whole other thing.
We supplied thread to automotive carpeting. I mean,
right.
It was a different kind of thread. It wasn't the same stuff, but it was used to manufacture the carpeting.
And it has to take the pounding of your feet on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally different specification stuff, but again, very product quality oriented material, and but big numbers. I mean, really, if you can get involved in that. I think my point before was that the days of working for one company for your entire working career are pretty slim. I mean, those things don't happen very often. So as you move through your career and whatever number of positions you have and whatever number of companies you work for, I encourage you to learn as much as you can and take that with you. It helped me a whole lot. It really did.
It's great advice. Alan, thank you so much. This has been great.
My pleasure. Thank you for giving me the chance to.
It's been great, and I hope our audience has picked up some nuggets. I'm sure they have, that will help them in the future as they think about what businesses to go in, and maybe think about a business that you presented that they hadn't even thought about, and they go, that might be a great idea to get into that.
For sure.
So thanks to Alan Sheinberg.
Thank you, Dan.
And if you want to get a hold of Alan,
please.
Is there an email? Or
yeah, my email address is, I'll spell it for you. It's A Sheinberg, spelled SHEINBERG 726 @gmail.com.
It's great.
Please feel free. I'm happy to help you any way I can.
This has been a wonderful experience having Alan here. And if you're digging for gold in the sewing thread business or any other business, Alan is the man to speak with. Thank you so much again, Alan.
Yeah.
And don't forget, Digging for Gold here on YouTube, on Spotify, and you can also find me at Bearded Brilliance on TikTok. Take care, everybody.
I wish you all good luck.